Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. My God, I believe, I adore, I trust, and I love you. I beg pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not trust, and do not love you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Do you know that prayer was actually taught to the three children of Fatima by an angel? If you look in the courtyard, you see statues depicting our Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Fatima, and the three children. Before they saw her, an angel taught them that prayer, so must be a pretty good one. So hopefully you've been watching these videos, paying attention. I know they can get kind of long, but I want to do my best to answer the questions that you have and to address these really, really important issues. I can't just give you like 10-second answers to these questions. They're just too profound because you're profound, you're complex. I mean, think about it. You have a body, you have a soul, you're a unity of body and soul. You experience happiness on 4 different levels. That's pretty complex. So you need to, as I said, think about sex. Not think about it in the terms of imagining it, but think through what this is, what it means, how God's plan works through it. Today I'm going to continue on the topic of sex before marriage. And my point today is that if it's wrong for 2 people to have sex prior to marriage, then it makes sense that it would also be wrong to be doing things, on purpose, of course, that would awaken sexual passions that would then lead the person to be having sex with someone they're not married to. There is no logic to say that if you can't have sex, well, then at least you should be able to do like other stuff, fooling around. No. That is playing games with sexual passion. Sexual passion is very powerful. Once it is awakened within a person, it is very hard to control. So this is about saying, don't play with the fire. What am I talking about a little more specifically? Well, people say, oh, can't we just like fool around? Different, I guess, ways of touching each other. And no, not if it's a sexual kind of touching. That would also include erotic forms of dancing, people undressing in front of each other, sending each other pictures over their phones in various states of undress. These things would be wrongful. It's also wrongful for 2 people who are not married to engage in certain kinds of, let's say, sexual acts which are not the conjugal act. And I'm not going to say anything more specific than that. I think you know what I mean. Sometimes I really wonder about the excuses that people will make. So they will do things that would naturally trigger sexual desire, and then they use the sexual desire as an excuse for the fact that they had sex. Oh, we were just playing strip poker and sex happened. Oh, really? It just happened. It took over you and you couldn't do anything. I guess taking condoms out and making consent videos also just happened too. No, sex did not just happen. You triggered it irresponsibly by what you were doing. If you really didn't want that to happen, then you shouldn't have been playing that game. Remember also that when it comes to triggering sexual passions, people need to be responsible for each other. 2 people might be doing something and one person doesn't really feel a problem because they're not feeling triggered. Well, what about the other person? Don't they realize that the other person actually might be feeling extremely triggered? So is that fair to this other person to be doing something that is awakening their sexual passion when there's really nothing rightful that they can do once that happens? I really do not understand the whole thing with the pictures. Why would anybody send those kinds of pictures to each other Why would anybody make themselves that vulnerable? I mean, how did this get expected? How did this get normalized? Is a person thinking that this relationship is so important that, gosh, if I don't send them these pictures, then they might leave me? Let them leave you. Or maybe are people thinking that, wow, like they sent me pictures, so now I have to send them pictures? I mean, who has the right to ask something like that? I find it so ironic how people complain about the church's rules. Oh my gosh, the church has all these rules, rules, rules. Did you ever stop to think that progressive ideology and the culture has its rules too? Where did this rule come from that says you're supposed to send those kinds of pictures? Where did that rule come from? Who made this rule that a good boyfriend or a good girlfriend is supposed to do that? And then there's other rules too. Or who came up with this rule that you're supposed to have sex by the third or fourth date, regardless of whether you're in any kind of relationship? Where did that rule come from? Or for that matter, who made up this rule that after prom you're supposed to go somewhere on the Jersey Shore and have sex with your prom date? I mean, where did these rules come from? To me, the church's rules, if you want to call it that, are just easier. Isn't it easier to practice chastity and purity rather than send those kinds of pictures and lose sleep thinking, like, what if they get out there? Remember what I always tell you about moral norms. Reasonable rules may limit you, but they also protect you. What about kissing? Well, there's kissing and there's kissing. If we're talking about kissing that shows tender affection, that could be fine. But then, as you know, there's other kinds of kissing which are intended to awaken sexual passion. So the first kind is okay, and the second is not, for the reasons that I explained. So if I were teaching in a classroom with students, this is the point where they would be saying, oh my gosh, what is it with the Catholic Church? You can't do anything. So at this point, I kind of laugh to myself, where else in life does this kind of logic work? If God has established in his creation some kind of principle that must be upheld or some value that must be respected, people can be really creative and come up with any number of ways of doing wrong things by violating that principle or disrespecting that value. And none of them are going to be okay, as many as people may come up with. I mean, for example, take the church's teaching about stealing. You have to respect other people's property, right? And if you're going to do that, then yeah, there's lots of things that you cannot do. Wait, could I steal someone's phone? No. What about a credit card number? Can I get somebody's credit card number and buy stuff for myself? Nope. What about something in a store, like if I don't have enough money, can I just take it from the store? Nope. Can I steal a horse or rustle me some cattle? No. Partner. Oh my gosh, the church is so strict. I can't do anything. That's right. You can't do anything evil. You cannot steal things or abuse people's trust in any of the many, many ways that people try to do it. The same thing applies when it comes to sex. It is for marriage, and within marriage, it is for bonding and babies. You cannot violate that gift in any of the many, many ways that people do in fact try to violate it. Do you know what I also find ironic? People complain that when it comes to sex, the church won't let you do anything. But then they go and they do those things that the church says not to do. And then because they are doing those things, they are no longer able to do the one thing that people are supposed to do when it comes to sex. That is to truly, sincerely, deeply love another human being and make a gift of yourself to that person. Because they have been doing these very things, they have damaged their capacity to truly love. They cannot be vulnerable. They cannot take their walls down. They cannot have real communication. They cannot build respect, establish trust, and most of all, give themselves to another person in a way that is generous, faithful, and ready for life. When people engage in superficial, low-risk, low-commitment encounters so that they can get a temporary good feeling instead of practicing chastity, they fail to do the work and take the risks and make the sacrifices that are necessary to create real relationships strong enough to last a lifetime. So here's the situation that so many people have wound up in. They're not afraid to get into bed with each other, but they're absolutely terrified of the L word. I'll give you a hint. It's not landscaping. Sex is not a toy. It is the life power and the lifetime love bond for marriage. People may say that they love each other, but unless they love each other enough to get married, their love is not strong enough for sex. It is not strong enough to handle the responsibility of the new life that can come from sex, and they certainly have no business treating God's gift like it's some form of recreation. Some people accuse the church of saying that they're teaching that sex is something dirty or worthless, as if to say that, oh no, you can't do that dirty thing. As if that's why priests take a vow of celibacy, because if you want to be holy, right, you can't do that dirty thing. No, it's absolutely a lie. Think about it this way. Why do you keep your best clothes in the closet under the plastic that comes from the cleaners? Why do you keep it there instead of wearing it all the time, every day? Is it because you don't like these clothes? Because they're not valuable to you? No, it's because they are special. So you save them for a special occasion. It's because they're valuable that you don't wear it every day. And if you agree that sex is something valuable and special, then you should treat it that way. It shouldn't be shared randomly. It should be saved for that special person who loves you enough not just to say that they will be with you always, not just to say that they will marry you, but who actually go through with their words and actually marry you. Before I go to the next topic, let me just return to a second for that whole question of living together before you're married, maybe even as a way of preparing for marriage or not. Sometimes people say that this is the way that you get to know the person before you're married. And what I would want to respond is that when it comes to those strengths and qualities which make or break a marriage, namely trust, respect, communication, virtue, all those things, there is nothing that you're going to find out by living with a person and being intimate with them that you cannot find out by getting to know them dating. In fact, postponing sex until marriage really opens up the door to that. Rather than focus on all the issues surrounding sex, focus on the relationship. Again, you will find out everything you need to know about this person in terms of those things that I mentioned if you talk to them, have good communication, meet their family, spend time together. It has worked for generations of people, and it can still work today. Sometimes also I hear this. People say, well, we're not going to get married because we're committed to each other. So marriage really doesn't change that or add anything to it. And again, I would respond, oh, definitely, it adds something. So the two things I would say about that, first of all, if people are saying, well, we're not married, but we're committed to each other, well, quite honestly, what is this commitment? I mean, if people are married, everybody understands exactly what that commitment is. They're going to love each other, they're going to be faithful to each other, they're going to be open to children and stay together till death do they part. That's all public knowledge. Everybody knows that that's exactly the kind of commitment they made. But if they're not getting married, well then, what is the commitment? Is it the same as marriage? Is it different? And that's not an unreasonable question. Sometimes people who are living together, they're doing it like conditionally, well, as long as this thing seems to be working. So that's one thing. The other thing is, yes, taking marriage vows matters. Some people say that, again, that their commitment does not need vows or a formal ceremony. I certainly do respect people being committed to each other. I mean, think about it. Commitment, as I've been telling you, is like the greatest expression of freedom. I mean, to be able to make a choice and have the strength of will to persevere in that choice. And of course, being together for a lifetime, I mean, that is a major commitment. I mean, being together, choosing, right, deciding with your freedom to be together for a lifetime rather than just to be together for a moment. What is added by these vows? When someone takes a vow, especially again in public, in front of public officials, in front of the representative of the church, people then are putting their commitment on the line and showing everybody that they're serious because they will accept accountability to others and to the community. They are saying that they are so confident about their commitment that they are not afraid to let the entire world know about this particular choice that they are making, and they are not afraid to allow their friends and family and even God himself to hold them to their word. So it adds that extra level of accountability. And let's face it, with wounded human nature, wounded and broken by original sin, sometimes human beings need that. Sometimes they need other people to say, no, go back, try again, work it out. We don't accept that you're going to break the vows that you made. We're here to support you and really insist that you keep the vows that you made. I'm now going to move on to the next topic, which is adultery. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says in number 2380, adultery refers to marital infidelity, when two partners, of whom at least one is married, to another party, have sexual relations, even transient ones, they commit adultery. So there you have the definition of adultery. One of the people who's having sex is married to somebody else. Of course, it could also be both. But that's the difference between fornication and adultery. Then it says this in number 2381. Adultery is an injustice. He who commits adultery fails in his commitment. He does injury to the sign of the covenant which the marriage bond is, transgresses the rights of the other spouse, and undermines the institution of marriage by breaking the contract on which it is based. He compromises the good of human generation and the welfare of children who need their parents' stable union. When somebody gets married, it means that their husband or wife is going to let go of any number of opportunities or other possibilities for the sake of that marriage. They make those serious sacrifices on the strength of that marriage vow, and they take risks on the strength of that marriage vow, and they lose opportunities because they're going to trust in the strength of that marriage vow. So for one person to back out of that vow or to break that vow is horribly painful. It is a terrible betrayal. It's like pulling out the rug from underneath the other person. It also, as the Catechism points out, hurts kids. It's not fair to them. So I think generally we should be in agreement that yes, adultery is wrong. Let me now talk about the topic of divorce. Divorce means legally the dissolution of the marriage contract. So in other words, the government considered them to be married and then broke the bond between them. So they're not married anymore. As you remember from our discussion on the sacrament of matrimony, there is no divorce in the Catholic Church for the reasons I explained there. So that means for Catholics, when you go into a marriage, you really need to have the mentality that this is your one shot. And so if you decide to take that step and make those vows, you have to be willing, perhaps, if necessary, to fight like a soldier to make this work. Sometimes there are very serious problems in a marriage that would justify separation of the spouses. Separation is permitted if one person in the marriage is an innocent victim of adultery, or if the other spouse causes, and I'm quoting the Code of Canon Law here of the Catholic Church, if a spouse, quote, causes grave mental or physical danger to the other spouse or to the offspring, or otherwise renders common life too difficult, end quote. So yes, it has to be some kind of a serious thing. In addition to one person causing another person grave mental or physical danger, it could be other really serious things such as criminal behavior, physical or psychological abuse, substance abuse, or serious financial irresponsibility. Those kinds of behaviors and crimes make a home unstable and unsafe, especially for children. Separation means living apart while trying to fix things. And I think it's important to point out that very often problems can be overcome if both people are trying. In my life as a priest, I can think of at least 2 situations in which I was working with couples where there was cheating, and with the help of God, they were able to reconcile, forgive each other, and move ahead to strengthen their marriage and family life. So that is possible if both people are willing to work at it. Again, in my experience, what I find is that marriages will break up if one person gives up. But if both of them are willing to try, a lot can be done. There can also be reasons for civil divorce. Civil divorce is allowable in the Catholic Church if, and I'm quoting the Catechism, it remains the only possible way of ensuring certain legal rights, the care of children, or protection of inheritance. That's in the Catechism number 2383. Of course, you realize that if a civil divorce has to take place, that the person realizes that they would not ever be able to attempt marrying another person without an annulment. So even if there are some situations that might justify separation, or might even justify a civil divorce, it's important to also recognize that there are other situations where divorce is not justifiable, where people get divorced for unjustifiable or perhaps even trivial reasons. For example, it would not be justifiable for a person to leave their spouse or maybe even leave their children simply because they feel that they're not happy in the present relationship, or maybe even feel that they would be happier with somebody else. The marriage vow says for better or for worse. If someone abandons this vow simply because they don't feel that this relationship is making them happy, what are vows worth? Remember, vows are not just made to each other. The vows are made in the presence of God. It's like they're made before God and to God. And God promises married couples, especially in the sacrament of matrimony, that He will give them the assistance and the grace and the strength in order to overcome the obstacles of life, one of which may very well be that at a particular time in their marriage that they don't feel very happy with each other. Also, people ask this question as well. If there's a couple that is just not feeling happy in this relationship, and again, I'm not talking about a high conflict relationship or an abusive relationship. They're just not happy. Maybe they feel the magic is gone, or they're not feeling for each other like they used to. Should they stay together for the sake of the kids? My answer would be yes. They should make every effort to stay together for the sake of the kids. They might even think this way about it. Those two people if they're not happy in their marriage, well, at least they took their shot. They made their choices. But these children have their whole life ahead of them. Why not give these children the stability and the support that they need to grow up and thrive so that someday maybe they can make better choices for themselves? You know, back in the 80s, it was very common for people to say that children are resilient. They'll just go along with the situation if the couple divorces. As long as the parents are happy, they'll be happy. But then a lot of other data came out throughout the 90s and the early 21st century, which really proved that none of this was really true. Divorce takes a terrible toll on children, and very often it doesn't really have its impact until they're in their early 20s when they're thinking about making relationship choices for themselves. Parents should do everything possible to spare their children the pain of divorce. In fact, there's actually a website dedicated to this idea that as a society, we need to do better at prioritizing the needs of children over the wants of adults. The website is called Them Before Us. However, there is some good news about the situation of a couple that's not terribly happy in their relationship. Studies have also shown that if there's two people that are just not happy, that most of the time, if they try, they actually will successfully make it better. According to one major study on marital happiness, it said this: 2/3 of unhappily married spouses in the study who stayed married reported that their marriages were happier 5 years later. In addition, the most unhappy marriages reported the most dramatic turnarounds. Among those who rated their marriages as very unhappy, almost 8 out of 10 who avoided divorce were happily married 5 years later. And this transition took place either because the couples worked their problems out with the help of counseling, or because they just stuck it out and stayed married. Other types of choices that would be sins against that first principle that sex is for marriage would be the following: polygamy, which is having more than one spouse; bigamy, which is having 2 wives or 2 husbands. The modern term for this is a throuple. That is not allowed in the teaching of the Catholic Church or in the plan of God's creation. Or anything such as polyamory, which is a mixed sex group of people of no set number, freely engaging in sexual relations with each other and raising whatever children come from that. It's a very recent thing and not even much of a legal structure to it as well. Then there are a few final things that hardly need any explanation. I think people understand well enough why they're wrong and how wrong they are. That would include incest, sexual relations between close relatives who cannot be married either by civil law or canon law. The sexual abuse of minors or children, of course, because that will cause them harm in their early years, which can follow them for many years, if not the rest of their lives. And finally, rape, which is forcing another person to engage in a sexual act. So the next time we're going to focus more on that second principle, that the purpose of sex within marriage is life and love. And I'll see you in that video.